Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason, speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. Today's video I wanted to talk about actually my last live stream I had with Adam from What the Gym and Bryer from Bryer Music Showcase. We did this live stream, I believe this last Sunday, where we inducted our own bands and artists from the 1960s into our own Music Hall of Fame, a project I've been working on with Adam, Bryer, Nick, and Garrett, all five of us. This was the first video that I was going to do. I have two videos for the 1960s. So we covered 25 different bands and artists that we would put in our Music Hall of Fame and kind of gave a reason why they deserve to be in a Music Hall of Fame. Unfortunately, I had a lot of internet trouble, and so it was not the best live stream as I kept cutting out of the video and it was my video on my YouTube channel, so I was kind of the person hosting it, yet I was unfortunately gone for most of the video because my internet went out or my Wi-Fi wasn't connecting. And anyways, luckily Adam and Bryer were able to do their best to continue on the video and carry it anyways. And so thanks a lot to Adam and Bryer for doing that. I'm sorry that I did that to you guys and I wasn't there for you, and appreciate you guys, just carrying on without me, and hopefully it wasn't the worst video in the world anyway. So, and I apologize that happened, and it's been a struggle since I moved into this new house. Been about 2 weeks or so that I've been here, and yeah, internet seems like sometimes it cuts out on me. I haven't really done any live streams, so this is the first time I did a live stream, and it really kind of was a disaster, unfortunately. So, but I'm hoping today I worked on I kind of messed around with the Wi-Fi, and hopefully it's fixed at the moment. Hopefully it'll continue to be good and working. I can do live streams in the near future, as I got more live streams, of course, to do. Anyway, so I want to do a video to talk about that last video because I wasn't around to really talk about what we were doing or the people that we were inducting. And I didn't really get to give my inductees either because I just couldn't, my internet just kept cutting out on me. So I'm taking the time to, go through what we did on this last live stream. So I'll go through Adam and Bryer's inductees. They inducted 10 artist bands themselves, and I inducted 5. And then I'll do another 5 along with Nick and Garrett, who will do 10. And we'll get through 50 of these band artists anyways. And then plan on doing the 1970s as well, similar. And then, I don't know, we're not sure what to do about the 1980s because not all of us are as well into the 1980s, I guess you can say. And then I still would love to do something with the 1950s, the 1990s, but I have a hard time finding people that can do it with me. 1670s is easy to find people to collaborate with, but 50s, 80s, 90s, I struggle, or 50s, 90s, I should say, I really struggle with, and 80s somewhat, but anyways. All right, so let's go through what Adam inducted into our Music Hall of Fame. Just a recap. His first inductee was Jimi Hendrix, or the Jimi Hendrix Experience. I believe his second inductee was Roy Orbison. I'm not sure if this is the order that they inducted them. This is what I've written down. But yeah, Roy Orbison inducted in. Then I believe Cream was his third inductee. Fourth was The Animals. Fifth was Tina and Ike Turner. Sixth was Dusty Springfield. Seventh was Pink Floyd. And this is when I didn't watch this part because my internet wasn't working, but this should have been what he inducted. Next was Pink Floyd in the 7th pick. 8th pick, Moody Blues. 9th pick, The Band. And 10th pick, Van Morrison. So those are the 10 that Adam picked, inducted into our Music Hall of Fame. And I'll say this for everybody, great picks. I think we did a really good job with the 50 picks that we got. And I do have an honorable mention that I'll mention, not this time, but maybe next time, that people that I thought about could make it in, but didn't quite make it in. Anyways, but I think we got 50 pretty good ones. Okay, Bryer, I'm not sure the order he went, but I want to say he first inducted Elvis Presley. I believe it was his first inductee into our Hall of Fame. Then I know he did Aretha Franklin. I think it was the second pick, maybe second inductee. And then I know he inducted the Supremes. He inducted Chuck Berry. He inducted Little Richard. I know that's 5 there. He inducted Sam Cooke at 6. Then I didn't see what else he did, but I know he was supposed to induct Marvin Gaye, which would be 7. The Rolling Stones, 8. Creedence Clearwater Revival, 9th. And then the last one was the Velvet Underground. So those were his 10 inductees. So those are 20 of them. And then I barely mentioned, you might have barely caught me talking about my 5, but I didn't really get a chance to really talk about my 5 that I wanted to induct in there. So I'm going to go through them right now. My first inductee into our Music Hall of Fame is Simon and Garfunkel, 2 guys from New York. One of my favorite duos, I would say my favorite duo of all time. Absolutely amazing duo. They're definitely one of the biggest of the 60s. I mean, obviously the Beatles, are the biggest band in the 1960s. But I feel like Simon Garfunkel is definitely up there as one of the most influential groups of the 1960s and had some of the biggest songs of the 1960s. I mean, so many huge hits. And they only made 5 albums between, I think, 65 and 70, somewhere around there, 64 and 70. I know the last one was 1970, Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And so, yeah, they basically took up the whole mid to late 60s and then broke up right after that, right into 1970. But man, and I'll go through some of their hits here in a bit, but they had 3 number 1 hits in the U.S. First one was Sound of Silence. That was really the big one that really started the band, or the group, I call it band, group, big. They did their first album, Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. was their first album. Did not sell well. But then The Sound of Silence, which was on that album, was just an acoustic number. Didn't really do that well. Then they kind of broke up a little bit. And then the producer decided to add drums, electric guitar, and like bass to the song, and it ended up being a number 1 hit for them. And then they came back and they made the album Sound of Silence, which had that single in it. So really, Sound of Silence was the real big one that really started them off in the 1960s. Like I said, number 1 hit for them. Then Mrs. Robinson was another number one hit, I think around 1967. I believe it was on their Bookends album, 67, 68. Anyways, and then Bridge Over Troubled Waters was their last number 1 hit. So those were the 3 number 1s. They also won Record of the Year, 2 Record of the Years, and 1 Song of the Year. Miss Robinson and Bridge Over Troubled Waters both won Record of the Year Grammys, I should say. They won the Grammys Record of the Years. Bridge Over Troubled Waters also won Song of the Year for 1970. And like I said, Miss Robinson, I want to say it was 67, 68, it won Record of the Year. They do have one album that won Album of the Year, which is Bridge Over Troubled Waters. So huge album. I mean, one of the best-selling albums of all time, I think. Sold really great. I think it's one of the greatest albums of all time. In my opinion, we've talked about it many times on my channel and the other people's channels that I've collaborated with. But yeah, huge number 1 album, number 1 song. Definitely at the height, and then they broke up after doing that album because they weren't getting along. But yeah, definitely one of the most influential groups and songwriters. Paul Simon, I think, one of the great songwriters of all time. And yeah, definitely one of the, I think, best, one of my favorite groups of the 60s period. Just to name a couple other big hits they had on the radio. The Boxer, Cecilia, Homeward Bound, I Am Barack, Scarborough Fair, A Hazy Shade of Winter, 59th Bridge Song, Feeling Groovy, and America, to name some of the more radio hits. All the other great songs weren't even radio hits, though. But I think every album is really good. You should check out all their albums. They have so many good hidden gems in there. But yeah, Simon Garfunkel, one of my favorites. Definitely glad to induct him into our Music Hall of Fame. Second inductee into our Music Hall of Fame is a guy named Robert Zimmerman, but most would know him as Bob Dylan. Came from Minnesota, I believe, went to California. And there was a huge, in the early 60s, this huge folk scene there in California that he kind of came a part of. Definitely, I mean, what can you say? I mean, he's one of the biggest names of all time. He's considered by many to be the greatest songwriter of all time. But any poll that you'll see Bob Dylan usually number 1 as like the greatest songwriter. And definitely I mean, you can't say, he's got to be one of the most influential singer-songwriters of all time as well. influenced so many people. A lot of people want to kind of be like Bob Dylan. Also, I don't think anybody's had their songs covered more than Bob Dylan. I mean, everybody's covered Bob Dylan and made hits out of Bob Dylan. I mean, you think the Byrds and Jimi Hendrix, to name a couple, Peter, Paul, and Mary. Everybody's taken his songs and made huge hits out of them as well. That's how great that is. I mean, you can look at, anybody in the 60s period trying to get into folk music. I mean, Bob Dylan was the guy that you wanted to be like. He's still around, and he's been making albums for, ever since, like I said, 1964 or so, 1963, I think is his first album. And right now he has 40 albums, over 60 years of music. I mean, he's still making music. I believe he made an album not too long ago. So, I mean, the guy's in his 80s and he's still going at it, I believe. But he first broke out with the album Free Will and Bob Dylan in 1963. Was kind of his first big hit album. Of course, being in folk, it was most about protest songs. That was big in folk music. It's protesting, whatever was going on, unions, the war, whatever. So it kind of started that way. But then with Free Will and Bob Dylan, he started coming up with some more hits. Some of them were more protest type songs. But what I love about Bob Dylan is his early stuff, when he had just acoustic guitar and the harmonica. And he has such a distinct voice. It's not a good voice, but yet it works for him. It's so distinct, and it really works for those early songs, especially, I think. But in 1963, he had a big hit with "Blowing in the Wind." It was kind of his first really big hit off of that album. Like I said, Peter, Paul, and Mary took it and made a huge hit out of it. Also, "Hard Rain's Gonna Fall" was a big hit there too. And there's some kind of political protestation in those songs. But he then followed that with "The Times They Are Changing," which is another album. And of course, it's a song too, "The Times Are Changing." Great song, another great social, political song at the time. And then also Another Side of Bob Dylan, which I have that album. It's over there somewhere. But I have the Another Side of Bob Dylan. It's actually my favorite Bob Dylan album. It's a really great album. I think it's best of his early period before he went electric, when he was just acoustic. And you got that acoustic sound and the harmonica. And just Bob Dylan. It's just very simple, but works very well. Has some great songs, like "My Back Pages" is my favorite off there. And then also "It Ain't Me, Babe" is a great song off of there. But anyways, yeah, so those are doing very well. Another side about Dylan is getting a little more pop into his music. Not a lot, but he's starting to go a little bit away from the protest songs because they weren't doing as well. And he was writing other hit songs at that point. There's a big transition in 1965 when he actually he went electric. He started playing electric guitar, which a lot of the pure folk singers really did not like, or folk fans didn't like. I guess they thought he was a sellout, as you say, writing more popular songs and using electric guitars, going away from his folk roots, but did very well with it. I mean, you have Bringing It Back Home and Highway 61 Revisited and Blonde on Blonde come right after each other. I know Highway 61 Revisited, Blonde on Blonde, two of his biggest albums of all time. Considered many his two best albums, which I do have Blonde on Blonde. And I think it's only Bob Dylan album, and Another Side of Bob Dylan. I have two Bob Dylan albums. Definitely want to get Highway 61 Revisited and Blood on the Tracks, and some Free Will and Bob Dylan. Definitely need to get some of those. But yeah, he went electric. People are upset, but man, he had some huge hits. Obviously, his biggest hit, probably of all time, is Like a Rolling Stone, which came off the Highway 61 Revisited album. But yeah, many, many hits. And so he continued to do that. I also wanted to talk about 1975, Blood on Tracks, another big album, one of my favorite albums of his. You got like Shelter on the Storms, one of his big hits off of there. But yeah, really good album. That was really his big period, I think, 65 to 75 was really kind of like where he was really having his best albums and hit songs. And he was still continuing after that for decades and decades. Yet I don't think he reached the heights of that period. Like I said, 1960, this is 1960s, but Bob Dylan definitely was big in the 1960s with all this. And it's interesting how his music changed from just pure folk to then integrating folk rock, blues, and the country. He even went through a Christian period where he converted to Christianity, and he had some Christian albums out. So it's kind of interesting. He had a bit of a renaissance in 1997 with the album Time Out of Mind. It came out with that album in 1997. I mean, you're talking a long time from 1960s. Which he was still doing music. It wasn't people weren't talking about it, so this was a big album for him. It won Album of the Year, or Grammy Album of the Year. He also won an Oscar for Best Song for the song Things Have Changed, which I remember seeing him win that. So he's a Grammy Award winning and Oscar winning in 1987, like 30 years after he started. Overall, he's won 10 Grammys in his career. Rolling Stones ranks him #1 songwriter of all time back in 2015. I think it's changed since then, but just wanted to say, like I said, he's considered a great songwriter. It seemed like he was one of the first songwriters that really, most songwriting was about relationships, I love you, or I'm getting over a breakup, or I have a crush on this person. And he was writing about different things that didn't have to do with relationships. And I think that really changed everything. Like the Beatles definitely have been a huge influence from Bob Dylan with, I think, like Help and Rubber Soul, kind of implementing some of his more type of writing style and going away from just talking about relationships, talking about other subject matters. I feel like that definitely influenced the Beatles and everybody else during that time period because of his songwriting. Like a Rolling Stone ranked #1 song in 2011. I guess that's Rolling Stone's ranking. They ranked it the #1 song of all time. Just to name some other songs that were huge for him. Like Rolling Stone, like I said, ranked #1 song. Mr. Tambourine Man, obviously the Byrds made a #1 hit out of that. Shelter from the Storm, My Back Pages, It Ain't Me, Babe, Rainy Day Women, All Along the Watchtower, huge hit for Jimi Hendrix. That's just a couple. There's a bunch more, but what can I say? Definitely one of the most deserving inductees, I think, in our Music Hall of Fame. All right, third inductee, I want to induct a band called the Monkees, basically coming out of California, though I think, or David Jones is from England, but it's an interesting group that's not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I think definitely deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. And I think what hurts them maybe is that early on, they were kind of made to be a TV show band. They were created from the studio as kind of a Beatles almost wannabe band, and they had their own TV show, The Monkees. And so it feels like they're not a real band in some senses because they're just a TV show band. And they had people writing songs for them, and in the studio they had musicians, I think, doing a lot of the instruments maybe. But still, it was them singing the songs, and they would write some of their own songs, I think, later on, and help, do their own instrumentations and build up that way. So I think maybe that helps them, but still, you can't talk about the 60s without talking about how big the Monkees were. They had so many huge hits, and they had a huge fan base. I know my mom was a huge fan when she was a kid in the 60s, so I still think that's worth something. And they're still a band I love listening to myself, and they have some huge songs in the 60s period that I think some of the greats, anyways, in my opinion. So I still think the Monkees deserve to be in the Music Hall of Fame. Monkees, the members are Mickey Dolenz, Davy Jones, Michael Nesmith, and Peter Tork. And I believe the only one still alive is Mickey Dolenz now. But it's kind of interesting because Michael Nesmith and Peter Tork were more musicians, while Davy Jones and Mickey Dolenz were more actors. So they kind of combined musicianship and actors. But Davy Jones and Mickey could sing as well. They were the two main singers of the band, so they actually did a really good job. I think I like both their voices are really good, and yeah, some great stuff. The first kind of big hit I think was Last Train to Clarksville. Did very well for them, but they have a lot of big hits. My favorite is I'm a Believer, written by Neil Diamond. I think it's a great song. I love great lyrics of I'm a believer, I couldn't leave her if I tried. Great line. Daydream Believer, another just great song. They're kind of a bubblegum pop period, but I do love that bubblegum pop period of the 60s. I think is very catchy pop songs that are really nice and really nice sounding. A little bit me, a little bit you. I'm Not Your Stepping Stone. Pleasant Valley Sunday. Mary Mary are some of their big radio hits. They're on the radio quite a lot in the 60s, and when I listened to 60s music. They had 4 #1 albums actually in the U.S. The Monkees, More of the Monkees, Headquarters, and Pieces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones. So 4 huge albums actually that did very well for them. Anyway, so I think they definitely deserve to be in the Music Hall of Fame. Here are the Monkees, my third pick. All right. My fourth pick is one of the biggest artists of the 60s, 70s period and most influential, and that is James Brown, who came out of the state of Georgia. I mean, let's look at some of the names that he is called. The hardest working man in show business, Godfather Soul, Mr. Dynamite, and Soul Brother Number One are some of his nicknames. Really great nicknames. I mean, he's not only his music, like I said, I think he really influential in especially funk and soul music. I think you have to really see him as maybe the most influential artist for those two genres that really kind of excelled in like the 60s, 70s period. Uh, he started in the 1950s, but it was the 1960s where I feel like he really peaked as an artist, as a solo artist. He started in kind of a group, and then he was so good he went solo. Great voice, obviously. He knew how to really belt it out. Also, just a great showman. One of the best showmen we ever had. The way he dressed, the way he dances on stage, did the splits, and you got the part where they put the coat on him like he's done, and then ow, and he throws it off like he's not done yet. You know, such great stuff that he did there. His first really big album was called Live at the Apollo. That really made a big impact. But he had a lot of hit songs like Papa's Got a Brand New Bag is one you hear a lot. And it seems like it's played in a lot of movie trailers as well. But yeah, that's a good one. I Got You, I Feel Good, another one you hear in a lot of trailers. And then It's a Man's World. Pretty big hits in the 60s. And then in the 70s, he had huge hits with Get Up. I think it's like something about Sex Machine, but I just put down Get Up. The Payback, and Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud, which is definitely a big anthem for the Black community, I think. In fact, he helped a lot with, there was riots going on, and I think, and he was in a concert, and he said, hey, let's settle down, So he definitely was one of the few voices that was the Black community, I think, listened to, which definitely was huge. Overall, he had 17 singles that went number one in the R&B charts. I mean, 17, so really huge on the R&B crowd. Also had hits with Get Up Off of That Thing and Living in America, which was a song in Rocky IV, which I actually quite liked. Maybe my favorite one that he's done. That's a good song in Rocky IV. Anyways, but yeah, like I said, definitely one of the most influential singers and performers that we've had in the 60s, and definitely belongs on here. James Brown, the Godfather of Soul himself. All right, so then with my last pick, or my last inductee for this time period for the our Music Hall of Fame, I'm going to induct the Everly Brothers. Born in Kentucky, moved to Tennessee, and really got big when they were in the Nashville area. The two brothers are Don and Phil Everly, and they had a mixture of rock and roll, country, and pop into their music. Definitely started in the 50s and had some huge hits in the 50s, but also had some big ones in the 60s as well. We'll say the first big hits were Bye Bye Love, Wake Up Little Susie, All I Have to Do Is Dream, and Problems were like four big hits. I think Bye Bye Love was the first really big hit that they had in I think around 1957 or something like that. It went number one and kind of blew up after that. Though they didn't write, actually these songs they didn't write. It wasn't until 1960 that they wrote their own song that actually did really well. The best song that they actually done, and that is Kathy's Clown, which came out in 1960. They wrote it. It went number one, and it's their best-selling single. And personally, it's my favorite of theirs. That's why I like to induct them here, is because that was one of my favorite songs in the 60s, Kathy's Clown. Really great song, and my favorite Everly Brothers song. They also had number one hits, like I said, with Bye Bye Love, Wake Up Little Susie, amazing. What's so great about them, and they're one of the best, again, I talked about Simon Garfunkel, but it's hard not to talk about them without talking about Everly Brothers. Came before Simon Garfunkel, and definitely is probably even more influential than Simon Garfunkel as far as people coming afterwards, all wanting to be like the Everly Brothers. Like, I've heard so many stories of like Graham Nash and Alan Clark. They were a duo before they started the Hollies band, and they were just two guys with acoustic guitars, and they wanted to be like the Everly Brothers. But then someone said you need to have a full band to really to get more popular or something like that. But they wanted to be like the Everly Brothers. I think even Gene Clark and Roger McGuinn, they were kind of a duo like the Everly Brothers before David Crosby joined, and then they kind of made the Byrds a band. But it seems like I've come across so many people that are like, we want to be like the Everly Brothers, So that was definitely a big thing. Two guys with acoustic guitars, and the way they played the acoustic guitars was just incredible. They had a really great sound with those two. I mean, they had a rock and roll sound with just acoustic guitar. That was pretty amazing. Especially Wreck Up Little Susie. That guitar riff is one of the great guitar riffs, I think, of all time. That bump, a bump, 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 ba bump, a bump, bump. I mean, so great. Great song. And also, obviously, their two voices together sounded really great as well. All I Have to Do is also a #1 hit. So they had four number one hits overall. Like I said, they influenced the Beach Boys. Said they were influenced by them, the Bee Gees, and Simon Garfunkel. I mean, everybody that wanted to be songwriting duos, you know, everything. Everly Brothers is huge on them. Overall, they had 21 studio albums. They made a lot of albums, actually, even though their biggest period, like I said, was probably from the late 50s into early 60s was kind of their peak period where they're hitting all their #1 hits. And then they kind of didn't really do much after that, but we're still doing stuff. It's Every Time and a Date with the Everly Brothers is an album, came out in 1960 and it charted #9. It was their biggest hit album. You don't really talk about albums with them. That was their biggest one. Only top 10 album they had. But yeah, still, they have to be in the Music Hall of Fame because, like I said, another one of the most influential duos of all time and groups and all that everybody kind of looks to. So that's my 5th inductee into our Music Hall of Fame. So that's my 5 I wanted to go over. And just thanks a lot again to Adam and Bryer for joining me on that live stream. Hope everybody enjoyed it, even though I had trouble with my internet. And hopefully it won't happen in the future. So yes, feel free to comment on what you think about those inductees. And I'd love to see your comments. And definitely subscribe to Adam and Bryer if you can. Two great guys. And just thank you to anybody watching this. Thank you for liking it. And thank you to all my subscribers for supporting the channel. I appreciate you all. And I hope you have a good day.